the petrol price is going up again this week, and we may not be out of the woods yet when it comes to January increases. South Africa's exchange rate, the global crude price, and the fact that South Africa is a net importer of fuel are counting against the country at this moment. But how can motorists and businesses cut their fuel spend going forward? For that, we have a motoring expert and training director at MotorVaps, Derek Kirkby. Derek, thank you very much for joining us. You have looked at this. You work in the motoring sector. Why are we paying so much for fuel here in South Africa?
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, let me say first of all that a lot of people pay the fuel price. We don't really know where it goes to. So I just want to give a very brief breakdown of where our fuel goes to, and some of the things. For me personally, I'm not 100% sure what it means, but this is where it goes to. So currently sitting with our fuel price now, this is before the increase on Wednesday, we pay a fuel levy of 393 cents. We pay 4 cents goes to customs, our road accident fund, 218 cents, then demand side management fee of 18 cents, and then we have other levies of 1 cent. So that's basically where our fuel goes to, or fuel cost goes to.
When we break down these fuel levies in South Africa, comparable to our neighbors like Botswana, where there's no such levies that are there, we should be expecting government to do something about the levies that we are paying. But government will tell you we can't do without, for example, the road accident fund levy.
Absolutely. So, and that's a good example, is neighboring countries don't have all these levies. Yes, they're subject to the global crude oil increase, etc., rand-dollar exchange. We understand that. But, it amazes me that we still pay to the road accident fund. But a few months ago, they told us that the road accident fund is bankrupt and has no money to pay out certain claims. So why do we still have this included in our fuel levy? I'm not 100% sure why we're still paying that.
Derek, let's talk about what you have been speaking about as an organization, MotorVaps, tips to motorists and businesses that are quite needed at this time about lowering their fuel consumption. Some of these that I looked at are quite, you'd think nothing is going to make a difference here. But when you put all of them together, there seems to be something in there. Take us through what motorists and businesses can actually do immediately to lower their consumption.
Look, and yes, like rightly you said, putting these together makes a difference. So, for example, and on the way home in this bad weather, etc., there was major traffic on the freeway. There was a collision, so traffic was standing still. And, a lot of motorists are going to spend probably half an hour not moving anywhere. But the car still idles, the car still is, all the Aircons are working, etc. So if you stopped for long periods of time like that, turn the engine off. Idling contributes a massive amount of fuel waste. So again, you can selectively turn the vehicle off. And this is why our modern vehicles have stop-start technology to try and save you with regard to that fuel. And another thing is maintain your vehicle. So make sure it goes for regular services. That way, a good, efficient engine is using less fuel. Again, maintain tires, tire pressure, tires in good condition. There's less rolling resistance, so the engine doesn't have to work as hard to obviously get the car to move. I love to see we in bakkie country or 4x4 territory here, so we all buy our nice big bakkies and double cabs, and then we put everything onto it. We put the rooftop tent, we put, I've seen axes, I've seen jerry cans, but no one's going anywhere. They're just going to and from work. That's weight, and obviously weight, the car again using more fuel, not to mention that when you're at highway speeds, etc., it's causing drag on the vehicle, so again you're using fuel. So if you look at small little things like that, and you put all those together, you can have a massive amount of saving in fuel.
Derek, one of the tips which are actually hard, would be very hard to swallow for many, many people, is to trade in your old vehicle for a smaller, a more economical model. That is quite hard, but to do or even contemplate in these economic times. But as you say, as motor veps, that is number one thing to consider in terms of a good car.
Absolutely. You've got to look at it and think, well, over the next, for example, if you did trade in an older vehicle or you sell it to get a new vehicle, you're going to finance that vehicle over 5 years. So look at the cost of fuel that you'd be spending over 5 years on your older vehicle versus what you would be on a newer vehicle. So if you did the math and you sat down, you'd probably see that it does outweigh you keeping your older vehicle. In these new vehicles, if you're looking at like a little 1 liter, for example, you get the turbo diesels. Not that diesel is very cheap nowadays, but again, you get a diesel, it does weigh out keeping your older vehicle. So you've got to really sit down, look at it with regard to car payments versus fuel, etc. And you probably find over 5 years there will be a saving, definitely.
Derek, some of your tips are quite straightforward. Don't drive in low gear. But you'd be amazed how many people drive in low gear so that they get velocity and they can drive faster. But this is also very important.
100%. So what we say is that you should at least try and get to the highest gear as early as possible. In your petrol vehicles, we're saying a recommended gear change should be done between 2,000 and 2,500 RPM. Now, if you were in most of the modern vehicles, if you were driving, you'll notice on the dashboard there's a little flashing arrow that is indicating go to the highest gear now, because that's where the engine's the most fuel efficient at that point. So if you don't have that technology, you can do it with any vehicle to 2,500 RPM, get to the highest gear as early as possible. Gone are the days where you'd get to an incline and you have to drop to third gear, foot flat to try to get up there. If you're planning things correctly and you're driving defensively, you'll notice there's a bit of an incline, so you can generate a bit of momentum to climb that incline with not having to drop down to a gear to get up the incline.
Derek, something else that has always confused me, and I'm sure many other viewers, is whether I should keep my tank half full or always keep it full. Whether it makes a difference or not, I'm not sure. What are your views on that?
Partly it's psychological. If I have a half a tank and I'm driving around and I see the needle's going to move a bit quicker. Full tank, the needle does move visually a little bit slower. And this is just basically because the sensors and the sender units in the fuel tanks, etc., will only sort of monitor the fuel at full. When it gets to a certain level, then it will start moving, adjusting, etc. But yeah, it's really is a myth that if you fill a car, or you got half a car, or you're on reserve, your car will still be using the same amount of fuel. Especially with the computers we have nowadays, it'll obviously give you a readout of how many liters per 100 you're doing. That will remain the same whether you got half a tank of fuel or full tank of fuel.
Another tip that I saw here is how we abuse as motorists that aircon and the heat in the car. The aircon is a huge consumer of petrol. How should we, in the summer months now, should we be operating that aircon in order to save on fuel?
Look, again, I said in the beginning, it's using these consumption systems selectively. So, for example, when I get into the vehicle, I put the aircon on just to drop the temperature in the vehicle. Once I get to a nice, comfortable temperature, I turn it off. I can feel, hang on a minute, the temperature is getting a bit uncomfortable again, aircon goes on again. That way, I'm sort of not continuously using the aircon. So I'm using this consumption system selectively. And that way, long term, I'll be saving fuel.
And of course, if you can't change the entire car that you're driving, what you say as Motorverbs is change the parts, regularly service the car. But most people will drive with one car part that obviously the engine light is telling them change this particular part, or really maintain the car or get it for service. So you're saying as soon as there's a problem with the car, in order to also save on fuel, you must make sure that the car is in good running order, and you need to change the parts in your car.
Definitely. You know, like I said, a more efficient engine uses less fuel. So if the parts are old and they, you know, wearing parts, that just makes obviously the engine work harder, which means the engine needs more fuel to work harder. So maintain your, and again, you know, people think of engine parts only. No, think of wheel bearings, like I said, tires, etc., because all these put less resistance on the vehicle's components, which means the engine doesn't have to work hard enough or harder to actually make the car go down the road.
Derek, I know you don't have a crystal ball where you look into the future, otherwise we wouldn't be talking right now. But let's talk about January. Let's look ahead into what you expect in January. We see the exchange rate in South Africa is actually worsening. The Brent crude oil price is increasing. What can we expect in January, looking at all those components and all those factors about the petrol price?
Look, you know, we've now, Wednesday we have sitting with a fuel increase, and quite a big one in fact. I think that the fuel increases are probably going to stabilize. We probably maybe, and I'm just again hoping, touching wood, that we're not going to see another fuel increase until maybe March next year, which is nice. You know, again, like you said, I can't predict these things. I don't have a crystal ball. And going by what's happening, who knows? Maybe they'll hit us with another fuel increase in January. You know, going back on what you said, let's trade our old cars in for new cars. That's also a hard pill to swallow now that, remember last week, our repo rate went up. So, you know, just when we think things are stabilizing, we get hit with repo rates going up, now another fuel increase. So like I say, we're hoping it'll stabilize. Maybe March we'll get another one. But as things are going now, I wouldn't be surprised if we get hit with one probably mid-Jan, somewhere around there.
Derek Kirkby, a training director and motoring expert, thank you very much for your time. Really tips that you can use in your everyday driving experience to lower your consumption, whether you're a motorist individually or a business. Is important nuggets of wisdom there.